At the start of the game, we're placed in the shoes of Officer Owens, a Gotham Police Department officer who's about to enjoy his waffles when he's poisoned by Scarecrow's fear toxin, and hell breaks loose. The next second, feral creatures surround you, and you're given two options. Either shoot at the feral creature, who seems to just kill and kill mindlessly, or instead hold your fire. But regardless of what option you choose, the result will always be the same, where Owens is knocked unconscious. Well, the results are not quite all the same. If you refuse to shoot in the diner, the two officers you see standing next to Owens' cell in the GCPD lockup have different dialogues. If you don't shoot anyone in the diner, the cops are empathetic towards Owens, and even surprised that he didn't shoot anyone in the diner. On the other hand, if you shoot the people in the diner, which most of the players do, the officers outside Owens' cell will talk about him losing his job and how he won't be able to live with himself once the fear toxin wears off. Keep in mind, there are multiple dialogues that can trigger. Some even have the two officers in the cell trying to talk to Owen, but they all have either don't shoot or shoot dialogue lines. This is such a cool detail, and you've probably walked past it so many times. Talking about the diner scene, the bodies of Sharon Jones, the bartender, and the guy who complains about someone smoking in the corner can be found in the morgue you visit during the Shadow War side mission, which is part of the Season of Infamy DLC. Sharon is easily spotted with her bright orange clothing, but in the upper corner you can also find the smoking companion. He doesn't really stand out, and he looks like a generic Gotham citizen. That's why most players miss this. Interestingly, in the same section of the morgue, you can find a lockup labelled Talia A, but there's no body inside it, meaning Talia al Ghul, who was shot by Joker in Batman Arkham City, is still alive out there. One of my favourite side characters in the Batman Arkham games is Azrael. He first appeared in Batman Arkham City. He was my favourite because he had such a cool, badass design in Batman Arkham Knight. The Catholic-themed costume and its impressive details in the game made this character stand out a lot. Now, some of you may ask, what's the deal with Azrael? Well, years ago, Michael Lane was part of a program to create the ultimate crime fighter. Instead, it turned him into an insane criminal. Thwarted by Batman, Michael confessed his sins to a priest of the religious sect, the Order of Saint Dumas. They recruited Michael to fight evil as their Azrael, who wore the mystical suit of sorrows and wielded the sword of sin. In Batman Arkham Knight, Azrael was briefly playable in story mode during the most wanted mission, Heir to the Cowl. After the October-November update, Azrael was also playable in the challenge maps. In both combat and predator mode, Azrael played almost exactly like Batman. That was explained in-game as a byproduct of his years of watching The Dark Knight. However, when Azrael uses the explosive gel, it will be in the form of a cross symbol instead of a bat symbol. Despite not having a cape, Azrael could still glide. His main difference when compared to Batman was that he has less gadgets. He also had separate challenges in Predator mode, which were often slightly more challenging than Batman's, as they often focused on confronting the enemies directly, rather than Batman's stealth. In the game, Azrael comes in Heir to the Cowl to prove himself, and to succeed the Dark Knight when he either retires or dies. You can unlock the titular Most Wanted mission during the 3rd chapter when you're investigating the last known location of the Oracle. Alfred will tell you about a mysterious person standing next to a burning bat symbol on a building rooftop. Head over there to find Azrael, who wants to prove himself worthy of becoming the protector of Gotham City. This will begin a series of AR combat challenges, which you have to complete as Azrael without getting hit once. Completing all of the challenges will give you 8 upgrade points, unlock the Azrael Atonement AR challenge, and the Angel in the Dark achievement. The Heir to the Cowl mission gives us 2 ending choices. When you gain control of Azrael and must make one of the 2 choices, you, as Azrael, can either kill Batman using the sword or break the sword. There's also a 3rd hidden ending, in which you can choose to just leave the clock tower. If Azrael decides to go in for the kill, Batman will counter his attack and knock him out. He will then gain control of Batman and take Azrael to the GCPD, where he'll spend the rest of his days behind bars. Now, for the second choice, Azrael breaks the sword after picking it up from the shelf. He'll then leave the clock tower in search of those who manipulated him. Azrael gave the sword to Batman earlier as a sign of trust, so this choice reflects how he sees the Dark Knight. You might be thinking, what's the right choice to make here? Well, there are no wrong choices to make. They'll all complete the most wanted mission without affecting the game's main storyline. If you want to know which is the canon choice, though, breaking the sword or leaving the clock tower sounds reasonable because, come on, it's Batman we're talking about here. The Order of St. Dumas cannot go unpunished, but it also remains to be seen if Azrael survives with the chip in his brain. Guys, before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got tons of Batman content in production that I'm sure you don't want to miss. Folks, did you know that the Swamp Thing is actually referenced in the Arkham Knight? If you don't know his origins, Alec Holland was a scientist working in Louisiana, where one day a lab explosion drenched him in chemicals and set him on fire. Well, desperately, Alec ran into a nearby swamp to extinguish the flames, but tragically died from his brutal injuries. However, the chemical fused with the swamp's plant life and allowed a plant element to absorb Alec's memories and personalities, creating the creature known as Swamp Thing. If we head to Magani Island's Botanical Garden and go to the entrance on the top floor, we can find a bench that has a plaque which reads, "In loving memory, Dr. Alec Holland." It's pretty cool that this isn't a riddle that you need to find, and we never really need to go inside the Botanical Gardens, so you kinda have to go out of your way to find this detail. Maybe this detail would have been better known if Rocksteady made the Botanical Gardens a Predator map, which some people speculate that originally was meant to be, as you can find grates all over the floors of this botanical garden, but nothing ever came of it. This is what I like the most about this game. You have to go out of the box to look for clues and connect the dots to solve mysteries. What's the most famous thing after Batman? That's right, folks, it's the Batmobile. My first Batman game was Batman Begins, based on the movie. In the game, we were given some Batmobile-specific missions, and from that day forward, I always wanted to drive the Batmobile and roam freely in it, and I'm pretty sure most of you must have that same dream. Well, Rocksteady made our dream come true in Batman Arkham Knight by giving us complete access of the car. You can literally call it any time during the game, and can use it to take down enemies, and can even use it to free roam around the massive world of Arkham Knight. Rocksteady didn't just give us some massive upgrades, and I'm loving every part of it. Rocksteady's take on the Batmobile appeared somewhat similar to Christopher Nolan's and the new DCRU Batmobile at the time, due to its heavily armoured exterior, easily capable of withstanding automatic fire from an assault rifle, and a grenade launcher blast, with no ill effect on its performance. Despite that, it was much sleeker than the Tumbler. The Batmobile featured a central single-man cockpit, as opposed to the traditional two-seater coupe design that the Batmobile typically adhered to. However, the Batmobile featured a room to transport 2 passengers within a sealed compartment in the back. It could also strafe short distances and avoid enemy attacks. It's also fast enough to be able to drive on walls and on ceilings. Each wheel had an independent suspension and turn, which gave the Batmobile a 0 turning radius. The car could turn its wheels 90 degrees in crab steer, which means the car can literally go sideways, and it's got normal and battle mode, in which the car goes all guns blazing. At the start, most of us thought that Batman was the Arkham Knight because of the bat symbol on the chest of his suit, but the actual person inside was Jason Todd. He was once the second Robin, following Dick Grayson's transition into Nightwing, and worked alongside Batman after being adopted by the hero from the slums of Gotham City. While headstrong and rebellious, Jason was also fiercely devoted to justice and aided Batman in combating crime in Gotham. This came to a tragic end when the youth was tortured and seemingly murdered by the Joker during an attempt to kill the villain for his heinous crimes. It was eventually discovered that Jason was alive and hell-bent on destroying his former mentor as the Arkham Knight, a title inspired by the very place in which Joker tortured him for over a year, and built up a massive military force to enact his plans for vengeance. The Arkham Knight worked with both Scarecrow and Deathstroke to turn Gotham into a city of fear on Halloween night as a twisted act of revenge on Batman. When Jason entered the wing, intent to kill the Joker once and for all, this played directly into the villain's hands, who then knocked out Jason with a crowbar. The story behind his insane transition is pretty sad and traumatic. Like Dick Grayson before him, Jason assumed the role of Batman's sidekick, Robin. While Jason enjoyed being a hero and had an aptitude for it, he also had difficulty with his temper, recklessness, and self-control, and he frequently disobeyed Batman's direct orders. Reprimands for that behavior rankled the new, headstrong Robin, who expected to be treated as a partner to Batman and a son to Bruce, but instead felt like a mere assistant. It was at that point that Joker combined several of his subsequent plans into a gruesome campaign to target Batman's closest allies, beginning with the second Robin. While Joker adored and defined himself for his battles with Batman, the villain had nothing but contempt for the hero's allies and believed they spoiled his game of cat and mouse with Batman. Joker had abducted, tortured, murdered, and dismembered an entire kindergarten class, knowing of Jason's empathy for children, stitched their body parts together in horrendous and mocking formations, and left a trail of blood from the crime scene to an abandoned, underground wing at Arkham Island. As Jason watched a mother cry and attempt to put her son back together, he noticed the blood trail and followed it to the forgotten sanatorium at Arkham Asylum, and turned off all his communications and equipment to ensure that Batman did not track him and attempt to prevent Joker's death. The forgotten halls of the asylum served as the perfect grounds to torture and humiliate Jason, as even when locked up, Joker had access to the wing thanks to several guards on his payroll, and Batman never suspected that Jason was just below the surface of the fully functional institution. With plenty of time, access, and resources, Joker crudely tied Jason to a wheelchair with barbed wire and rope within the filthy and abandoned wing, regularly beating him within an inch of his life with a crowbar, brutalized him with electrical and surgical implements, and convinced him that Batman had forgotten about him by showing him a picture of his new sidekick in training, Tim Drake. As his torture continued throughout the months, Joker eventually strung Jason up by his arms from the ceiling and branded him with a red-hot iron rod in the shape of a J on his face to signify that he belonged to him. After he filled Jason with raw emotion and rage towards Batman, Joker finally had him sit in front of a camera and voiced his hatred of the Dark Knight before he asked him for the man's true identity. As Jason prepared to answer, Joker quickly shot him in the chest, which seemingly murdered him, and sent the footage to Batman to further torture the hero, and blamed Jason's death on the Dark Knight. However, the truth was that Joker had kept Jason alive and continued to torture him for several more months, and deceived Batman into believing the young man to be dead, as he felt Jason's hatred of his former mentor was too good an opportunity to kill off. After he abducted a doctor from the asylum, Joker had the unfortunate man patch Jason up. His armor had felt the blunt of the bullet impact, and then immediately murdered the doctor after his usefulness had served his purpose. True to Joker's prediction, Jason eventually fled from Gotham after his final days of torture some months later, created a new identity for himself, eventually becoming the Arkham Knight, and planned his revenge on both Joker and Batman, and eventually killed him for failing to save him from the psychopath and apparently replacing him with Tim Drake. No matter how hard the Arkham Knight tried, Batman was able to outmaneuver every obstacle and villain thrown at him, and dismantled Jason's entire military army and operations. Once the Knight revealed his true identity to Batman, the hero reached out to his adopted son to fix the damage Joker inflicted on him. Realizing that Bruce never stopped caring about him, Jason gave up on his vendetta, renouncing his alter ego and realigning himself with Batman once more in fighting crime, donning the new identity of the Red Hood. One of my favourite Easter eggs in Batman Arkham Knight is the terrifying encounter with Manbat. Yeah, just like most of you, I was also grappling around the city when suddenly Manbat made me literally jump out of my chair. This encounters the mission of the Creature of the Night, which is to capture the Manbat. Those of you who don't know who the Manbat is, worry not, because we got you. A gifted scientist who was diagnosed with a rare condition that caused chronic deafness, Dr. Kirk Langstrom went to extreme lengths to develop a cure. Splicing his DNA with that of a vampire bat transformed Kirk into a hideous monstrosity known as Manbat. After seemingly killing his wife, Francine Langstrom, Manbat embarked on a deadly rampage across Gotham City before he was captured and cured of his affliction by Batman. Kirk met his future wife, Francine, in graduate school. The two aimed to cure human diseases by using genetic splicing. The two had a happy and functional marriage despite financial issues caused by the widespread skepticism towards their research. Kirk eventually developed chronic deafness, providing him with a challenge and an opportunity to test his theory. Finally developing a method of splicing the DNA of Desmodus rotundus, the common vampire bat, into human DNA, Kirk tested it on himself in hopes of curing his hearing loss. However, the effects were far stronger than Kirk anticipated, causing him to mutate into a human-bat hybrid. Out of control of his actions, the creature destroyed the lab, inadvertently and apparently killing Francine in the process, before escaping out into Gotham. In the game, Manbat travels aimlessly around Gotham before he encounters Batman atop a building on Megani Island. A brief battle ensues, during which Batman is able to take a blood sample and consult with Alfred. While Batman is investigating his history, Manbat can be seen flying around Megani Island. Batman later injects Langstrom with the cure on Bleak Island. Finding it ineffective, Batman hunts Manbat down a second time, this time knocking him unconscious and injecting him again on Founders Island. By the time the Batmobile arrived at the GCPD lockup, Manbat had returned to normal. Langstrom is locked in an isolation chamber and breaks down in tears upon discovering Francine's fate. Later that night, upon Batman's return to the laboratory, Francine's body had disappeared, and the words, "Forever my love," were written upon a broken screen. When it's Halloween, or if you change your system's date to October 31st, Manbat attacks Batman on Megani Island yet again, before flying off into the night. Officer Bolden informs Batman that Kirk had transformed back into Manbat and had escaped the building. His ultimate fate remains unknown, as does Francine's. Now, I know that we all have been loving the Batsuit since the first Arkham game, and I think that Rocksteady gave us the most awesome, badass and coolest suit designs. Batman started by using a suit made of a Kevlar weave, with ceramic plates centered around the bat symbol, with the inclusion of a holographic screen projector in the right gauntlet that allowed him to communicate with Oracle and other allies face to face. This suit was a modified version of the one in Arkham City, called version 7.43. Upon request, Lucius Fox delivered the Batsuit version 8.03, an advanced suit designed with flexible plates, overlaying an MR fluid armor layer and incorporating the latest in cutting-edge technology. The tri-weave bodysuit consists of an outer and inner layer, made from a titanium-dipped tri-weave fiber mesh. Sandwiched in between is the MR fluid-based liquid armor system. The proprietary WayneTech Smart MR fluid hardens in response to impacts, specifically designed to provide superior shock absorption, as well as enabling greater force delivery behind counterattacks. The liquid body armor layer is also more flexible than the ceramic or fiber-based alternatives used in previous suits, allowing for greater maneuverability and faster elimination of multiple targets in quick succession, via takedowns. The suit's subsystems are symbiotically integrated with the Batmobile, and provide a quick launch capability via the vehicle's electromagnetic ejection system, analogous to launch from a railgun. Designed to withstand up to 6 Gs of acceleration, the suit increases navigational capability by tolerating high acceleration maneuvers without risk of injury while gliding, grapnel, boosting, and high-speed ejection from the Batmobile. And not just this, the Batsuit version 8.03 incorporates the aforementioned holographic projector, as well as the ability to remotely control the Batmobile using haptic controls that are mounted on the gauntlets. The gauntlets themselves possess retractable blades and sensors that work in conjunction with detective mode to analyze foreign samples and upload data to remote sites. While the new suit was high-tech in nature and offered Batman his full mobility, it was, however, only moderately effective against bullets. While the actual plates could easily stop bullets, as demonstrated by Gordon and Batman at the end of the game, in between the plates was where the weakness of this armor was, as demonstrated by the Arkham Knight, as the liquid armor layer was highly effective against impact, but only offered moderate protection from bullets, especially at point-blank range. However, if shot, the suit was designed to compress around the wound and stop the bleeding, as revealed by Robin in an optional conversation. By the way, most of you might not know this about MR fluid. Well, we dug up about that too, and found some pretty interesting things. The Wayne Tech Smart MR fluid layer most likely consists of iron nanoparticles suspended in an oily liquid. Under normal conditions, the armor remains flexible. Still, when an electrical current is applied to circuits running throughout the armor, the resulting magnetic fields realign the iron particles and harden to protect the user from impacts. Interestingly, the Batsuit's liquid armor is stated to harden on impact, not via electrical current, a distinct property of dilettants, not MR fluids. One possibility is that the suit incorporates piezoelectric-piezomagnetic elements that generate transient magnetic fields when stressed. There's also a DLC where you can wear the Batsuit version 8.04 and the Batsuit version 8.05, which is an updated version of the 8.03 suit with a gold bat symbol on the chest. The significance of Kevin Conroy's performance in Batman Arkham Knight is rooted both in the staggering scale of production and its role as the narrative conclusion to the Dark Knight story in the Rocksteady trilogy. But did you know that it was marketed as Kevin Conroy's final performance at the time? His true finality in the role became a multi-year journey involving posthumous releases. Well, recording for Arkham Knight was a grueling 2-year undertaking. Conroy recorded a whopping 37,000 lines of dialogue for this game alone. Unlike his experience on the Batman the Animated Series, where the cast recorded together in one room to build chemistry, the Arkham process required him to sit alone in a soundproof booth for 4-hour shifts, twice a day. And I was thinking even the voice actor of Batman doesn't rest. He often described this as exhausting and physically demanding, as he had to provide multiple variations and tones for every single line to account for the game's branching paths and player choices. While Arkham Knight was the end of the trilogy, the story served as a meta-commentary on Conroy's long-standing tenure. The Nightfall Protocol, which sees Bruce Wayne's home destroyed and Batman seemingly killed to protect his loved ones, acted as a poetic goodbye for fans who had followed Conroy's voice since 1992. However, following his passing in November 2022, his legacy expanded beyond the trilogy. He returned to the Arkhamverse one last time in the 2024 release Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League, which features a heartfelt post-credits tribute to the actor. Though Arkham Knight was his final game in the main trilogy, his absolute final performances as Batman came in the 2024 animated film Justice League: Crisis on Infinite Earth Part 3. In a moment that many fans consider the perfect epitaph, his Batman faces the end of the multiverse and says, "I care, Joker, about Gotham, about justice, and if it has to end, at least I can go out like this, being Batman." As of 2026, Conroy's presence is still being felt through posthumous projects recorded years before his death. Notably, he appears as VP Baines in the 2025 Devil May Cry anime on Netflix. The producers of that series confirmed that no AI was used to replicate his voice, and his sessions were completed while he was still with us. Furthermore, his passing led his longtime collaborator Mark Hamill to officially retire from voicing the Joker. Without Batman, Crime has no punchline. Have you ever wondered why this game looks so magnificent even in 2015? Well, the reason behind this was the decision to use a heavily modified version of Unreal Engine 3 instead of the then new Unreal Engine 4, which was a strategic move by Rocksteady to leverage their existing expertise and proprietary tools built over a decade. By the time development on Arkham Knight began in 2011, the team had already rewritten large portions of the engine's core code for Arkham City. For the finale, they pushed the 32-bit architecture of UE3 to its absolute breaking point, effectively turning it into a 64-bit hybrid capable of utilizing the 8GB of RAM in PS4 and Xbox One, which was a massive leap from the 512MB available on the PS3 and 360. The most significant modification was the world streaming system. In previous games, the world was divided into manageable chunks separated by doors or tunnels that acted as hidden loading screens. Because the Batmobile can travel at over 100 miles per hour, the engine had to be capable of throwing assets into memory at lightning speed without causing hitches or pop-in. Rocksteady solved this by creating a predictive streaming algorithm that analyzed Batman's trajectory and preloaded high-resolution textures and geometry blocks miles ahead of its position. This allowed for a map 5 times larger than Arkham City to be traversed from one end to the other with 0 loading screens, even when diving from a skyscraper directly into the Batmobile's cockpit. Visually, the engine was overhauled with a custom lighting shaders pipeline designed to handle Gotham's perpetual rain and neon-soaked atmosphere. The rain tech is particularly advanced. Rather than simple 2D overlays, the droplets are individual particles that respond to light sources and interact with Batman's suit. The shaders were written so that as Batman spends time in the rain, his cape and armor gradually transition from a matte finish to a glossy wet look, with procedural ripples forming on his shoulders. Furthermore, the polygon count for Batman alone was boosted to roughly 150,000 polygons, allowing for micro details, like the individual weave of his carbon fiber plating and the mechanical moving parts of his suit-up animation. Finally, the engine integrated a suite of NVIDIA GameWorks features directly into its core physics. This included interactive smoke and fog, which reacts to the Batmobile's tires and Batman's movements, and paper debris, which uses PhysX to ensure that thousands of pieces of trash and newspapers on the street tumble realistically in the wake of a chase. The destruction system was also a custom addition. It allowed for procedural crumbling, where the Batmobile doesn't just pass through obstacles, but actually breaks stone pillars and corners into unique, physics-simulated chunks based on the angle and speed of impact. This level of environmental reactivity was something standard Unreal Engine 3 simply could not perform without these heavy, ground-up modifications. The story of Henry Adams is perhaps the most chilling subplot in Batman Arkham Knight, serving as a dark reflection of Batman's own internal struggle. Henry was introduced as the control patient, and he was one of the 4 people infected with Joker's mutated, Titan-poisoned blood during the events of Arkham City. While the other 3 victims, who were Christina Bell, Albert King, and Johnny Charisma, immediately manifested obvious traits of the Joker's personality, Henry appeared completely normal. He was a mild-mannered school headmaster who seemingly retained his sanity, leading Batman to believe Henry's immune system held the key to a cure. Because of this, Batman trusted him implicitly, allowing Henry to roam Panessa Studios and assist Robin in monitoring the other patients. The terrifying detail of Henry's secret is that he wasn't immune at all. He was simply the only one who inherited the Joker's deceptive genius and calculating cruelty. While the others were low-level Jokers, representing his obsession, his physical brutality, and his theatrics, Henry represented the Joker's intellect. He spent weeks playing the role of the victim, feigning helpfulness and fear, all while secretly orchestrating the downfall of the other candidates from within Batman's own base. It is heavily implied that Henry was the one who leaked the location of Vanessa Studios to Harley Quinn. He didn't want to be rescued, he wanted to clear the field. Once Harley's distraction provided the opportunity, Henry's true persona emerged. In a cold, efficient sequence, he murdered the other 3 infected individuals. He didn't do it out of madness, but out of a twisted sense of perfectionism. He viewed the other 3 as failures or diluted versions of the Joker who are unworthy of the legacy. Henry's arc concludes with a shocking realization of his own role in the Joker's resurrection. After executing the other candidates, he turns his gun on Batman and Robin. However, as he looks at Batman, he notices the Dark Knight's eyes glowing with the same sickly green hue as his own. Henry realizes that the Joker's consciousness isn't just looking for a host, it's actually looking for the strongest host. As players have witnessed in the final act of twisted devotion to the Joker's memory, Henry realizes that he's still an inferior vessel compared to Batman. If he killed Batman, he would be destroying the masterpiece. To ensure that the ultimate Joker, Batman, could emerge without any competition or distractions, Henry turns the gun on himself and pulls the trigger. This act of suicide wasn't an escape, it was a cleansing of the board, leaving Batman as the sole remaining carrier of the Joker's spirit. I actually noticed some of the further, small details related to this as I further connected to the game. Like, for starters, throughout the Vanessa Studios missions, if you use the photo mode to look closely at Henry's eyes, they occasionally shift colours or carry a faint, unnatural glint long before the reveal. Another thing I noticed was that Batman's computer notes on Henry mention his blood is stable, which was a clever misdirection by Rocksteady. It wasn't stable because he was fighting it, it was stable because the Joker's DNA had already perfectly integrated with his own, hiding like a predator in the tall grass. We know that the whole Arkham series has been based on dark and gritty themes. The M rating for Batman Arkham Knight was a watershed moment for the franchise, as the previous titles maintained a T rating. According to the game director, Sefton Hill, the rating was actually a surprise to the team. They didn't set out to make a mature game, they simply refused to compromise on the story's gravity. When the ESRB returned with an M rating, Rocksteady chose not to cut the problematic themes, and thank God they didn't. They believed that doing so would lose the soul of their narrative conclusion. This rating ultimately allowed them to lean into a darker, more visceral aspect of Batman's psyche and the true brutality of his enemies. The rating was largely triggered by a series of intense sequences that pushed the boundaries of superhero media. The most notorious, and my favourite of these, are the Jason Todd torture scenes, which are presented as interactive hallucinations. We witnessed the Joker physically and mentally breaking Jason over the course of a year in an abandoned wing of Arkham Asylum. When I played for the first time, I was a little younger, and it scared me because these weren't just normal scenes. These scenes include Jason being beaten with a crowbar, chained to a wheelchair with barbed wire, and the visually jarring moment in which he's branded with a red-hot J on his cheek. The psychological horror is deepened by the reveal that Joker brainwashed Jason into believing that Batman has abandoned him, even showing him a photo of the new Robin to shatter his spirit. It doesn't just end here. Beyond the backstory, the game features moments of active, visceral violence that were absent in previous titles. One of the most cited reasons for the rating is the interrogation of a militia driver, where Batman parks the Batmobile's massive wheel inches from a man's head and slowly spins it to extract information. Additionally, Professor Pig's side mission involves investigating crime scenes with realistic blood pools and discovering the victims who had been lobotomized, surgically mutated, and turned into mindless, genderless dolls. The finale of this mission features a blood operating table and the disturbing revelation of Pig's surgical processes. Rocksteady also gave us the treat of atmospheric details that enriched the Gotham After Dark vibe, like the red light district area that features neon signs for live nude girls and adult shops, adding a level of urban grit, which, obviously isn't a very kid-friendly thing. Also, the dialogues included more aggressive swearing with words like bitch and many more, and it was used frequently by thugs and the Arkham Knight himself to emphasize high stakes. My favorite disturbing part was when, during the final sequences, you play as the Joker. You can gun down dozens of unarmed thugs and civilians in a first-person perspective, a stark contrast to Batman's no-killing rule. Another reason for this decision was the scene where Barbara Gordon is forced to put a gun to her head and pull the trigger, as it depicted self-harm with high-fidelity visuals. You've all seen the Demon Bat, or the nightmare figure at the end of the game. To witness this, you must achieve 100% completion and trigger the full Nightfall Protocol. This sequence serves as the definitive punctuation mark on Bruce Wayne's life, transitioning him from a man in a costume into an eternal, supernatural urban legend. The scene purposefully mirrors the origin of Batman. Two thugs corner a wealthy-looking couple and their young son in an alley, threatening them with a gun, when the thugs mock the memory of the dead Batman. A silhouette appearing to be the Dark Knight emerges on the rooftop. As the criminals charge, the figure doesn't just descend, it levitates, its cape expanding into massive, tattered wings, and it erupts into a terrifying, flaming demonic entity before screeching and lunging at the screen. The transformation isn't magical, but rather the ultimate application of Scarecrow's refined fear toxin. After the world learns that Bruce Wayne is Batman, the fear of the man was lost because he was revealed to be immortal and vulnerable. By faking his death at Wayne Manor, Bruce was able to kill the man so that the Bat could become something more. He utilized the very toxin that nearly destroyed him to enhance his theatricality. By using a controlled, non-lethal dose of a modified gas, he ensures that any criminal who looks at him doesn't see a man in a suit, but their own worst nightmare. This effectively restores the supernatural edge Batman had in Arkham Asylum, making him an unstoppable force of terror that can never be unmasked again because, to the public, Bruce Wayne is dead. The developers at Rocksteady have also confirmed in interviews and behind-the-scenes segments that this figure is indeed Bruce Wayne. He isn't a ghost, and it isn't someone else taking up the mantle. It's Bruce Wayne utilizing his vast resources to create a Batman 2.0. This new version of Batman doesn't have to worry about Bruce Wayne's social life, taxes, or public appearances. He's now a 24/7 force of nature. This ending also set the stage for the Batman scene in the 2024 Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, where it's revealed that Batman did indeed survive and eventually rejoined the world. Though his nightmare face was his primary method of operation for years during his quote-unquote death. Some of you might have noticed the appearances of the Joker in the environment. The Jokerizing billboards are a masterclass in psychological environment storytelling, utilizing a technique often referred to as look-away scripting. This mechanic is designed to simulate Batman's deteriorating mental state as the Joker's personality begins to overwrite his own. It doesn't happen randomly. It's a sophisticated system that tracks the player's field of vision. When the game detects that a specific asset, like a billboard or a neon sign, is completely out of the player's line of sight, it swaps the standard texture for a Jokerized version. If you look back again, the texture often reverts, making the players question their own eyes. What makes this detail truly impressive is its progressive intensity. In the early stages of the game, these hallucinations are rare and fleeting, designed to make you think you just saw a glitch. However, as Batman's Jokerization meter increases, the frequency of these swaps rises. Rocksteady also integrated specific audio cues. Sometimes a faint, distorted laugh will play exactly when the texture swaps, triggering a primal sense of unease. This was a deliberate move to take the Joker beyond just a talking ghost following you around. It turned the entire city of Gotham into a manifestation of Batman's psychosis. By the time you reach the final act at the GCPD, even the most wanted posters and the shifting schedules on the precinct walls can begin to show Joker's influence. This level of detail ensures that no matter where the player looks, they feel the suffocating presence of a villain who's technically already dead, yet more alive than ever inside Batman's mind. Edward Nygma's presence in Arkham Knight represents the culmination of his obsession, moving beyond simple scavenger hunts to a large-scale feat that spans the entirety of Gotham's underground, because this time he is back. In the final chapter, the Riddler's revenge mission is framed as a desperate, high-stakes game of life and death centered at Pinckney Orphanage. After tricking Catwoman into a trap, Riddler fits her with an explosive pinky ring collar that requires 9 unique keys to unlock. To earn these keys, Batman must complete a series of trials that test not only his intellect, but also his mastery of the brand new Batmobile, which Riddler mockingly calls a mobile coffin or a tank that he is specifically designed to destroy. The most jarring addition to Riddler's repertoire is his series of underground racetracks, such as Mental Blocked Crushinator and Condemned. These aren't just speed tests, they're environmental gauntlets in which the Riddler has wired the entire track's infrastructure to his own neural network. As Batman drives, the players must use the Riddler Blockade 2.0 remote to manually activate and deactivate green and red platforms, walls, and crushing pistons in real time. These tracks push the Batmobile's physics to the limit, requiring the player to drive on vertical walls, leap across massive gaps, and navigate rotating drain cylinders like in the Drain Pane Trail. Riddler's engineering is so advanced here that he has effectively built a city beneath the city, complete with lava pits and high-speed hydraulic systems designed to crush a 10-ton vehicle in seconds. His preparation for Batman's utility belt is equally meticulous. He demonstrates an intimate knowledge of Batman's history, openly mocking his reliance on gadgets like remote electric charge and explosive gel. Many of the 243 trophies are locked behind puzzles that require advanced synchronization, such as using Batmobile's winch to power a generator, while Batman simultaneously uses the line launcher to stay above a pressure-sensitive floor. Riddler often screams cheater over the comms, when Batman utilizes a gadget in a way he didn't predict, revealing his deep-seated insecurity. He even developed a Riddlebot army with color-coded sensors. Blue bots can only be damaged by Batman, while red bots are exclusive to Catwoman, forcing the duo to use the dual-play combat system to survive. The finale of this obsession is the Riddler mech suit, a giant green glowing exoskeleton that the Riddler built himself to finally level the playing field. The suit is equipped with laser arrays and a kinetic shield that makes him invincible until his robot minions are cleared. However, the true riddle is the game's completion requirement. Unlike other villains, Riddler cannot be fully defeated until every single one of the 243 trophies, riddles, and breakable objects is cleared. Only then will he step out of his protective barrier at the orphanage for a final physical confrontation. Locking him in the back of the Batmobile and driving him to the GCPD provides some of the most satisfying dialogue in the game, as he realizes that despite all his engineering and perfect preparation, he was ultimately undone by his own inability to stop talking. Did you know that the tragic irony of the cure in Batman Arkham Knight is that the very substance that saved Batman's life in Arkham City became the biological vessel for his potential destruction? During the events of the previous game, a dying Joker who was suffering from the fatal, bone-wasting effects of the Titan formula injected Batman with his own tainted blood. While Batman eventually synthesized a cure using a combination of Ra's al Ghul's ancient DNA and Mr. Freeze's cryogenic technology, cured or neutralized the fatal Titan sickness, but it did nothing to remove the Joker's mutated genetic material, which had already begun to rewrite Batman's cellular structure. The Joker virus is described by Batman and Robin as a form of transmissible dementia, similar to Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, but accelerated by unique properties of the Titan formula. Essentially, the Joker's blood acted as a biological backup of his personality. In the 9 months following Joker's death, the mutation began to manifest in 4 other victims, who had received tainted blood transfusions from Gotham hospitals before the supply could be intercepted. These victims began to physically and mentally transform into the Joker. Batman's blood, however, was unique because he was the only one to have the original cure in his system. His body fought the infection more effectively than the others, keeping the Joker's psyche dormant for nearly a year. The true nightmare begins in Arkham Knight, when Scarecrow's fear toxin acts as a chemical catalyst. The toxin, designed to shatter a person's mental barriers, weakened Batman's inner walls, allowing dormant Joker DNA to finally take hold of his visual and auditory cortex. This is why Joker appears as a constant, mocking hallucination throughout the game. It isn't a ghost, it's a chemical and biological manifestation of the infection. The fear toxin didn't create the Joker, it simply gave the virus the opening it needed to start the Jokerization that was discussed previously in the video. By the game's climax, the infection is so advanced that Batman's physical appearance begins to change, as you might have noticed too, in which his eyes turn a sickly, glowing green, and his skin becomes pale. The cure that Batman eventually finds is not a chemical one, but a psychological conquest. In the final sequence inside Batman's mind, he utilizes the Joker's own greatest fear of being forgotten to lock the persona away in a mental cell. While the biological mutation remains in his blood, Batman's indomitable will effectively quarantines the Joker's psyche. This victory is what allows Bruce to initiate the Nightfall Protocol, knowing that while his body might carry the Joker's blood, his mind is once again his own. Did you know that you can actually find Ace the Bat-Hound's bowl in the game? It's one of the most heartwarming yet easily missed environmental details in Batman Arkham Knight. While the game is defined by its grim atmosphere and the literal crumbling of Bruce Wayne's life, this small piece of domestic clutter offers a rare glimpse into the private, more human side of the man behind the mask. It serves as a bridge between the legendary comic book history of the Caped Crusader and a specific, grounded world Rocksteady built over the course of a decade. The Dog Bowl is located in the penthouse office of the Wayne Tower, specifically on Founders Island. If you explore the office suite where Bruce meets with Lucius Fox, you can find the bowl tucked away on the floor near one of the sideboards or tucked under a mahogany desk. It's a simple, polished stainless steel bowl, rendered with the same high-fidelity physical shaders used for Batman's armor. On the front of the bowl, the name Ace is prominently engraved in clean, black uppercase sans serif lettering. Now, for those of you who don't know who the hell Ace is, let me introduce you. Ace has been a staple of the Batman mythos since his debut in Batman number 92 in 1955. Originally a German shepherd who wore a mask, the character has seen many iterations, from a campy Silver Age companion to a more grounded, scarred guard dog in modern comics like Batman Volume 3 number 11. By placing this bowl in the game, Rocksteady confirms that in the Arkhamverse, Bruce Wayne does indeed have a dog. Given that we never see Ace in the game, it's widely assumed by fans that the Hound is kept at Wayne Manor, safely away from the chaos of the citywide evacuation, though he clearly has a designated spot at the office for when Bruce is working day shifts as a billionaire. The presence of Ace's bowl also serves a specific narrative purpose. It humanizes Bruce Wayne at a time when he's losing his grip on his own identity due to the Joker's infection. Wayne Tower is filled with artifacts, including a portrait of Thomas and Martha Wayne, and the voice messages from Lex Luthor and Vicky Vale. The bowl reminds the player that Bruce has a life worth coming home to, that includes responsibilities and companions that aren't just crime fighters in spandex. It adds a layer of tragic irony to the Nightfall Protocol. When Bruce returns to the manor at the end of the game to trigger the explosion, fans are left to wonder about the fate of his loyal companion. but some assume that Ace was safely relocated with Alfred's help. From a technical standpoint, the dog bowl isn't just a static texture. Like many physics-enabled objects in the modified UE3, the bowl reacts to the environment. If Batman walks into it, or if a nearby explosion occurs during a combat sequence, the bowl will slide and clink with a distinct metallic sound. The lightning in the office reflects off the still surface, showcasing the HBAO Plus technology by creating realistic contact shadows between the bowl and the expensive carpet. It's a micro detail that 90% of players might miss, but it's exactly the kind of world building that makes the Arkham series feel like a lived-in universe. Starro the Conqueror can also be found in the game. Yeah, it's the same star-shaped monster that most of you saw in the 2021 Suicide Squad movie by James Gunn. The inclusion of Starro in the A Matter of Family DLC is one of the most significant pieces of world building in the entire Arkham series, as it provided the first definitive proof that the Justice League's cosmic-level threats existed within Rocksteady's universe. This Easter egg is hidden deep within the Seagate amusement park, a twisted offshore oil rig converted into a carnival by the Joker. While the DLC focuses on Batgirl and Robin's rescue mission, this secret chamber suggests that the park's previous owner, Edward Shark, was involved in some high-level black market exotic specimen trading. To locate Starro, you must head to the Great White Shark attraction area within the park. Look for a heavy, reinforced metal door marked with a restricted access sign. This door isn't part of the main objective and can easily be bypassed if you aren't looking for it. You must use the remote hacking device on a nearby console to bypass the security lock. Once inside, the room transitions from a colourful carnival aesthetic to a cold, sterile laboratory environment. In the centre of this room sits a massive, floor-to-ceiling glass cylinder filled with murky water and glowing blue light, containing the pulsating form of Starro. Starro is depicted as a giant, prehistoric-looking starfish with a single, massive central eye. Unlike many other static Easter eggs in the game, this one is animated. The creature's limbs occasionally twitch against the glass, and its eye follows the player as they move around the tank, creating a deeply unsettling atmosphere. The tank is labelled with a plaque that identifies it as a specimen of unknown origin, though DC fans immediately recognized it as the alien parasite capable of mind control. The visual fidelity here is impressive. The modified UE3 handles the refraction of the water and the slimy textures of Starro's skin with the same level of detail usually reserved for main boss encounters. Well, in 2015, this was viewed merely as a fun nod to the Justice League's first ever villain. However, from our perspective in 2026, we now know this was a massive piece of foreshadowing for the Arkham vs. expansion. This specimen was the first hint that Rocksteady intended to move beyond Gotham and into the broader DC universe. It directly laid the groundwork for the 2024 release of Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League, where a much larger version of Starro serves as a major biological threat and pivotal plot point. Finding it in the Arkham Knight prequel DLC confirms that Brainiac or other cosmic entities had eyes on Earth long before the events of the main game. Also, the room containing Starro is filled with additional environmental storytelling. You can find research notes and computer terminals that imply the scientists were attempting to study the creature's regenerative properties and its ability to produce spores. There are also empty cages and surgical tools nearby, suggesting that the Great White Shark was potentially trying to weaponize the alien's mind control abilities for profit. This adds a layer of dark corporate espionage to the Joker's playground, proving that even without the clown prince of crime, Seagate Amusement Park was a place of genuine horror. We all know that Scarecrow is the most feared villain in Arkham Knight due to his fear toxin. Well, the reality is a bit different. You see, the climax of Batman Arkham Knight provides a poetic and terrifying resolution to Jonathan Crane's arc, proving that for all his talk of mastering fear, he was merely a student of it compared to the Dark Knight. Throughout the game, Scarecrow's goal is to unmask Batman and prove to Gotham that the legend is just a frightened man named Bruce Wayne. He believes that by exposing Batman's humanity, he will destroy the symbol and replace it with a city-wide reign of terror. However, the finale in the ruins of Arkham Asylum flips this dynamic entirely, revealing that Scarecrow's own psychological foundation is far more fragile than the man he sought to break. The reveal occurs after Scarecrow injects Batman with a lethal dose of his refined fear toxin while the world watches on live television. Instead of collapsing in terror, Batman remains entirely stoic. This baffles Scarecrow, leading to the iconic line, "Why aren't you afraid?" In this moment, Scarecrow realizes that his life's work is a failure because he's encountered a mind that can transmute fear into focus. When Jason Todd intervenes to free Batman, Bruce wastes no time injecting Scarecrow with his own toxin. This is the moment of truth because, ironically, Crane, who spent years studying the nightmares of others, is suddenly forced to confront his own. Scarecrow's greatest fears are revealed to be a supernatural, monstrous version of Batman. Through the Crane's toxin-addled eyes, Batman doesn't look like a man in a suit. Instead, he transforms into a towering, demonic entity with glowing eyes and a terrifying, distorted voice, which was my favorite visual and we've already discussed in this video. Now, the Nightmare Batman represents Crane's subconscious realization that Batman is not just a man, but an elemental force of justice that can never truly defeat or understand. The irony is crushing, because the man who wanted to show the world Batman's fear ended up showing the world his own, as he whimpers and cowers in the corner of the room, begging the beast to stay away. From a gameplay and a visual perspective, this scene is a masterpiece of technical execution. The camera shifts to Scarecrow's perspective, making the player feel the overwhelming presence of the Demon Bat. The lighting shifts to hellish orange and black, and the sound design uses shepherd tones to build an unbearable sense of panic. This total psychological collapse is why Scarecrow is the only villain in the game who doesn't have a witty remark when you eventually lock him up in the GCPD. He remains in a near catatonic state of shock, proving that Batman didn't just beat him, he broke the master of fear using his own weapon. So in the end, Scarecrow literally got some taste of his own medicine. Did you know that the game had a lot of bugs and issues on the launch date? It's true. The launch of the Batman Arkham Knight on PC is widely considered one of the most significant technical failures in modern gaming history. While the console version received critical acclaim for its visuals and stability, the PC port was outsourced to a small team at Iron Galaxy Studios, consisting of roughly 12 developers. Because Rocksteady was entirely focused on optimizing the game for the then new PS4 and Xbox One architectures, the PC version was neglected until it was far too late. When it finally arrived on June 23rd, 2025, it was fundamentally broken, prompting an overwhelming negative review bomb on Steam within hours of release. Well, the list of technical issues was staggering. Most infamously, the game was hard capped at 30 frames per second, despite PC players expecting 60 FPS or higher. Even more egregious was that high-end GPUs of the era, such as the Nvidia GTX 980, struggled to maintain even that 30 FPS due to severe memory leaks and stuttering issues. Visually, the PC version was actually inferior to the PS4 version at launch. It was missing crucial graphical features like ambient occlusion and the specialized rain shaders that made Batman's suit look wet. Many textures failed to load entirely, resulting in a blurry, low-poly mess that looked like a game from the early 2000s rather than a 2015 blockbuster. Warner Bros. Interactive Entertainment took the nearly unheard-of step of suspending sales of the game on June 24, 2015, which was just one day after launch. They pulled the game from Steam, and physical retail shelves worldwide, an admission that the product was not meeting their standards. This was a PR nightmare that lasted for months. During the blackout period, Rocksteady was pulled away from DLC development to help Iron Galaxy rebuild the port's core infrastructure. WB even offered a full refund to any player, regardless of how many hours they played, which was a massive financial blow and a rarity in the industry at the time. After that, the game didn't return to Steam for a full 4 months, finally relaunching in October 2015. While the re-release fixed the 30 frames per second cap and restored the missing graphical effects, it still suffered from performance hitches on hardware with less than 12 GB of system RAM. As a peace offering, Warner Bros. Gave everyone who had purchased the game before the fix free copies of every previous Arkham title. By 2026, the PC version is, ironically, considered the definitive way to play, as modern hardware can finally brute force the engine's quirks to run it at 4K and 120+ FPS, revealing the incredible detail Rocksteady originally intended. Did you know the stunning rain effects in Batman Arkham Knight are not just a visual filter? It's a sophisticated, multi-layer simulation that serves as the technical backbone of the game's atmosphere. To achieve the stunning midnight and miserable look of Gotham, Rocksteady developed a procedural weather system that interacts with every surface in the game world in real time. Unlike previous entries, where rain was a simple 2D particle overlay, the rain in Night uses 3D vertex-based calculations. This means each droplet is a physical entity that can be lit by the environment, refracted through neon signs, and blocked by physical objects like swings or bridges, ensuring that Batman stays dry when standing under cover. The most impressive aspect of the tech is how the rain interacts with Batman's suit and the Batmobile. Rocksteady utilized dynamic flow maps. These are invisible textures that tell the engines which direction down is, relative to the geometry of an object. Well, on the Batsuit, as Batman stands in the rain, a wetness shader slowly increases the specular highlights on his armor. The engine calculates the angle of his cowl and shoulders, causing droplets to realistically bead and streak downwards. The carbon fiber section of the suit reflects light differently than the flexible mesh joints, creating a highly complex material response. The cape uses a unique porous to saturated transition. When dry, the cape is matte. As it absorbs procedural rain, it becomes heavier and shinier. The physics engine actually increases the mass variable of the cape slightly when it's fully saturated to simulate the weight of waterlogged fabric. The Batmobile is when the real deal of this tech comes through. When the Batmobile is stationary, the rain pools in the crevices of its armor plating. However, once you accelerate, the tech switches to a velocity-dependent simulation. As the car reaches high speed, the flow maps are manipulated by the vehicle's speed and direction. This causes the rain to shear off of the sides and hood of the Batmobile, mimicking the way water is blown back by the wind resistance. Furthermore, the engine's heat is factored in. Near the rear thrusters and the glowing orange battle mode vents, the rain textures are programmed to evaporate or steam, using a custom particle emitter that triggers only when the car's heatsink assets are active. It gets more complex for viewers because Gotham is saturated with neon lights. The rain tech had to work in tandem with the game's lighting engine. Every individual raindrop acts as a micro-refractor. Using a technique called screen space reflection, or SSR, the droplets on the camera lens and on Batman's suit pick up the specific colors of nearby light sources. If you stand under a red Gotham City Royal sign, the water on Batman's shoulders will glow red. Additionally, when the camera gets close to Batman during a cinematic or a fear takedown, the engine applies a procedural bokeh effect to the rain, blurring the droplets into aesthetic circles of light, which creates a cinematic quality that was revolutionary for the hardware. The craziest detail about this tech is that it's so precise that if Batman stands next to a wall during a storm, only the side of his body facing the wind will accumulate wetness textures, while the side shielded by the wall remains matte and dry. We all know that in previous Arkham titles, Batman followed a strict hands-only approach to melee combat, but Arkham Knight introduced a layer of desperation to the gameplay. For the first time, Batman can scavenge the environment, picking up baseball bats, lead pipes and wooden planks, dropped by disarmed or unconscious thugs. This wasn't just a visual flourish, it was a massive shift in the free-flow combat system that allowed Batman to maintain momentum while dealing massive damage that regular punches couldn't achieve. In the game, to initiate a pickup, you must be standing over the weapon and press the guided combat takedown buttons. The most critical detail is that picking up a weapon doesn't break your combo streak. In fact, it rewards you with a weapon pickup score bonus. However, these tools are not permanent. Every weapon has a health bar, and it usually lasts for about 5 to 8 strikes before it shatters or bends into uselessness. Batman intentionally discards or breaks the weapon after this limit, symbolizing his reluctance to rely on lethal tools for longer than necessary. Using a melee weapon changes the properties of Batman's attacks. Strike speed is slightly lower due to the weight of the objects, but the impact radius and damage are significantly increased. The sound design also shifts, which means that instead of the wet thud of a fist, you hear the metallic clink of a pipe or the hollow crack of wood. Furthermore, the physics engine calculates the breakage of these items. A wooden plank will splinter into multiple pieces to linger on the floor for a few seconds, while a metal pipe will visibly deform and bend before Batman tosses it aside. Did you know that the clock tower in Batman Arkham Knight serves as the clandestine nerve center of Barbara Gordon, aka Oracle? It's arguably the most detail-dense interior in the entire game. The secret Batgirl costume reveal is a direct, loving homage to the 1966 Batman television series starring Adam West. In that show, a hidden switch inside a Shakespeare bust was used to open the entrance to the Batcave. In the Arkhamverse, Rocksteady placed a similar bust on the side table near the window. When Batman interacts with it, he flips up the head to reveal a hidden button. Pressing this causes a section of the wall disguised as an ordinary bookshelf to rotate backwards and slide away, revealing a high-tech glass display case. The costume housed within the glass is Barbara Gordon's original Batgirl suit, specifically the one she wore during the events of the A Matter of Family DLC. Every detail of the suit is rendered with the game's signature tactical realism. The secret button does more than just reveal a costume. It triggers a total environmental overhaul of the room. When Batman activates the computer terminal on the central desk, the clock tower undergoes a mechanical metamorphosis. The floor tiles shift, the bookcases retract, and massive server banks and holographic displays rise from the floor. This is a technical marvel within the game's custom engine, as it happens in real time without a loading screen. If you look closely at the desk during this transition, even the smaller items like pens, folders, and coffee mugs are physically affected by the shifting machinery. Beyond the suit itself, the area surrounding the secret button is packed with narrative clues. Near the bust, you can find a framed photograph of Barbara and her father, Jim Gordon, taken years prior. If you interact with the computer as Batman, you can access personal files and even listen to audio logs that further flesh out the history between Bruce and Barbara. There's also a hidden living record of the Joker's cruelty. If you look around the room after the transformation, you can find a copy of the Killing Joke book, which is also one of my favorite Batman books. There are also subtle references to the hospital where Barbara recovered. These details collectively paint a picture of the clock tower, not just as a base, but as a fortress of solitude for a woman who refused to let a tragedy define her limits. There's also another small detail here that, if you visit the clock tower at different points in the story, the contents of the computer screens change to reflect the current mission status, showing that Oracle is actively working even when she isn't on screen. Did you know that the 9-month gap between the death of the Joker in Arkham City and the evacuation of Gotham in Arkham Knight is the most significant period of off-screen lore in the franchise? It's often described by Commissioner Gordon as the longest night, a period of eerie, unnatural peace where Gotham's crime rate plummeted because the various gangs were paralyzed by the power vacuum left by the Clown Prince of Crime. However, behind this facade of safety, both Batman and his enemies were engaged in a desperate arms race, preparing for a war that everyone felt was coming. The choice of a 9-month window is a deliberate piece of thematic writing. This represents a gestation period. Just as a child takes 9 months to be born, the Joker virus took exactly 9 months to fully incubate within the 5 infected hosts. During this time, Batman used his resources to track down the victims of tainted blood transfusions. He spent the gap building the high-containment cells at Panessa Studios and worked with Tim Drake, Robin, to analyze the mutating DNA. Batman kept the fact that he was the 5th host a secret from everyone except Robin, creating a massive strain on his relationship with the Bat family during these months. This period of isolation is what allowed the Joker's consciousness to slowly erode Bruce's mental defenses without anyone noticing until it was too late. Batman also knew that the next threat would be different. He spent the 9-month gap obsessed with the concept of the Knight and the Batmobile. While earlier versions of the Batmobile existed, Bruce spent these months perfecting the battle mode transformation and the power winch system, specifically designing the vehicle to be a one-man army capable of taking on a tank division. While Gotham celebrated the death of crime, the villains were actually organizing. Scarecrow, who had been missing and presumed dead since his encounter with Killer Croc in Arkham Asylum, spent these past months in hiding, surgically reconstructing his face to look like a literal scarecrow and refining his fear toxin into a gaseous cloudburst form. Most importantly, this was the period when Scarecrow allied with the Arkham Knight. Together, they used the 9-month gap to build their militia, train the troops, and build the drones. The gap is characterized by a specific line from the opening cinematic line. When the Joker died, it was like the whole city took a breath, and then it held it. This silence was the ultimate weapon for Scarecrow. By letting Gotham feel safe for 9 months, he ensured that when he finally struck on Halloween, the psychological impact of the terror would be 10 times more effective. The peace wasn't a victory, but it was a breathing exercise before the city was suffocated. Did you know that Commissioner Jim Gordon knew Batman's identity? And this revelation is one of the most poignant emotional anchors in Batman Arkham Knight. This moment occurs during the game's climax at the ruins of Arkham Asylum, after Scarecrow forces Gordon to unmask Bruce Wayne on a live global broadcast. When Bruce looks at him, seemingly apologetic for the burden of a secret, Gordon simply says, "I've known for a long time." This admission recontextualizes their entire relationship across the Arkham trilogy, shifting it from a partnership of convenience to one of profound, unspoken mutual respect. But as a veteran detective and a man who eventually left the GCPD, it's technically impossible for Gordon to not have known. The clues were always there. The vast wealth required for Batman's specialized military-grade hardware. The timing of Batman's debut coincided perfectly with Bruce Wayne's return to Gotham after years abroad, and the fact that Batman almost exclusively worked with people close to Bruce. In Arkham Knight, Gordon even hints at this earlier in the story when he mentions to Batman, "You're not the only one who looks after their family." This suggests that Gordon was aware of Barbara's role as Oracle and, by extension, who she was working for. He chose to look the other way, not out of ignorance, but out of a tactical and moral necessity. Gordon's silence for over a decade was a deliberate choice to protect the legal integrity of the GCPD. If the Commissioner of Police officially knew the identity of a vigilante, he would be legally obligated to arrest him or be complicit in his crimes. By maintaining the mask between them, Gordon allowed Batman to operate in the grey areas where the law could not reach. Their relationship was built on the don't ask, don't tell principle. Gordon didn't need to know the name of the man under the cowl because he knew the character of the man. To Gordon, Batman was the person and Bruce Wayne was the mask. He respected the mission enough to let Bruce keep his privacy until the very end. This detail is deeply rooted in the prequel, Arkham Origins. During their first meeting, a younger, more aggressive Batman saves Gordon's life. Even back then, Gordon saw the humanity in the Batman, recognizing that he wasn't a monster, but a man driven by a familiar kind of grief. Over the years, as Gordon watched Bruce Wayne pour his fortune into Gotham's charities and hospitals, while Batman cleaned the streets, the two figures merged in his mind. The final unmasking wasn't a discovery for Jim. It was simply the end of a long, necessary charade. It allowed them to finally speak as friends before the Nightfall Protocol changed everything. The no loading screen feat in Batman Arkham Knight was widely considered technical sorcery in 2015, because it was 2015 and who would have thought that? It still holds up beautifully today. Rocksteady's primary goal was to eliminate anything that reminded you that you were playing a video game, ensuring that the Be the Batman experience was never interrupted by a spinning icon or a progress bar. Achieving this required a total overhaul of how Unreal Engine 3 handled data, shifting from a room-based loading system to a massive, predictive world streaming architecture. To make Gotham seamless, the developers carved the city into a complex grid of hundreds of cells. As Batman glides or drives, the engine isn't just rendering what you see, it's constantly calculating your trajectory and velocity. If you're gliding towards Miagani Island, the engine is silently dumping the assets for Founders Island from the RAM and prefetching high-resolution textures and geometry for the buildings ahead of you. This process uses a technique called MIP mapping, where objects exist in multiple levels of detail. When you're a mile away, the GCPD is just a low-poly box. As you get closer, the engine swaps that box for a detailed model, then a high-res version, and finally the interactive interior, and this all happens without a single hitch in the frame rate. The biggest hurdle to a seamless experience was actually the Batmobile. Because the car can travel at over 100 miles an hour, Batman can cross the map much faster than he could in previous games. Standard hard drives in 2015 couldn't read data fast enough to keep up with that speed. To solve this, Rocksteady implemented a priority-based input-output system. When the Batmobile's afterburners are engaged, the engine aggressively prioritizes road-level assets like street lamps, trash, and storefronts, while delaying the loading of high-altitude skyscraper details. This is why, if you look very closely while driving at top speed, you might occasionally see a distant building's windows look slightly blurry for a split second. That's the engine sacrificing distant pixels to ensure the street you're currently hitting stays rock solid. Unlike Arkham City, where entering a building like the museum often required a fade to black or a slow door-opening animation, Arkham Knight treats major hubs like the GCPD, Vanessa Studios, and the Clock Tower as physical parts of the open world. When you fly through the roof of the GCPD, the game doesn't trigger a loading state. Instead, the interior is technically always there, but it remains dormant in a low-memory state until you get within a certain radius. Rocksteady used portal culling to make this work. The engine only renders the complex interior of the precinct once you have a direct line of sight through a window or door. This allowed the GCPD to house hundreds of NPCs, evidence lockers, and holding cells that you can walk right into without ever seeing a loading screen. Did you know that the Nightfall Protocol was Rocksteady's narrative scorched earth policy? After spending nearly a decade crafting the most celebrated superhero trilogy in gaming, the developers were adamant that Arkham Knight would not end with a to-be-continued teaser. Instead, they built a finale designed to dismantle the character of Bruce Wayne entirely. By the end of the game, the Batman who fought thugs in an alley in Arkham Asylum is gone, and is replaced by a terrifying, permanent myth that no longer requires a man behind the mask. Rocksteady implemented a two-tier ending system to reward players for truly cleaning up Gotham. This design ensures that the definitive end only happens once Batman's work is truly done. Now, as we know, we were given two endings. The crazy part here is that we have to work for the second ending. Let me break it down. The first ending is triggered by defeating Scarecrow. It shows Bruce unmasked and vulnerable, but the story feels incomplete because Gotham's other threats remain active. Now, for the second ending, it unlocks after 100% completion. This version includes the final cinematic at Wayne Manor and the Nightmare Batman epilogue. Rocksteady's intent here was clear. You cannot walk away from the cowl until every loose end from the previous 3 games is tied up. The core of the Nightfall Protocol is the destruction of Wayne Manor. When Bruce lands his Batwing on the front lawn, he's surrounded by a swarm of reporters and paparazzi. He walks inside, and the mansion erupts in a series of massive, sequential explosions. This wasn't just a dramatic exit, it was a psychological necessity. By killing Bruce Wayne, Batman removes his greatest weakness. The world saw a man die, which allowed the legend to become immortal. Rocksteady intended for this to be a closed loop. In their eyes, Bruce Wayne had to die so that Gotham could finally be safe from the escalation of villains targeting his loved ones. It was the ultimate sacrifice, giving up his life, his fortune, and his identity to become a 24/7 force of terror that criminals could never unmask again. Following the game's release, lead dev Sefton Hill confirmed in several AMA sessions that they viewed this as the definitive end of Bruce Wayne's story within their studio. While the 2024 Suicide Squad game brought this Batman back, Arkham Knight was built with the finality of a Shakespearean tragedy. The credits even feature a slow, somber version of "I've Got You Under My Skin," emphasizing that Batman and the Joker's toxic relationship ended in mutual destruction, leaving Gotham to find its own way forward through the rest of the Bat family. Did you know that the absence of a full Victor Zsasz Most Wanted mission is one of the most discussed cut content mysteries in Batman Arkham Knight? After his prominent roles in Arkham Asylum and the terrifying phone booth killer side quest in Arkham City, fans expected a high-stakes conclusion to his Tally Mall obsession. While Zsasz doesn't appear as a physical boss Batman can tackle, his presence is felt as a chilling background radiation of the city's collapse. Confined primarily to security footage and hidden data files, the most explicit appearance of Victor Zsasz during the main story mission, where Batman investigates the clock tower after Barbara Gordon's abduction. While using the Batcomputer to review security footage of the street outside, you're tasked with tracking the vehicle that took Oracle. However, if you ignore the objective and scan the other camera feeds, you can spot Zsasz. He's in a dark alleyway, hunched over the bodies of 2 deceased GCPD officers. In a truly unsettling detail, he's shown posing their bodies into a lifelike, macabre tableau, his signature calling card. If you zoom in, you can see his distinctive, scarred appearance. This cameo confirms that while the militia was taking over the city, Zsasz was treating the evacuation as a free-for-all to finally complete his skin tally. The evidence found within the game's PC files suggests that Rocksteady had originally planned a much larger role for him. A high-fidelity character model for Zsasz exists in the game's code, featuring a level of detail that far exceeds what would be necessary for a blurry security camera Easter egg. The data miners discovered unused dialogue strings that imply Batman was meant to track Zsasz for a series of murder tableaus across the 3 islands, similar to the Professor Pig mission. It's widely theorized by the community that Zsasz's mission was cut or merged with Professor Pig's The Perfect Crime, since both villains are serial killers who pose their victims. Rocksteady likely felt that having 2 separate missions with almost identical gameplay loops would feel repetitive in an already massive game. Despite his lack of screen time, Zsasz's story is technically concluded in the Gotham City stories. These stories reveal that Zsasz was actually one of the first villains to thrive during the evacuation. While the other A-list villains were busy arguing over Scarecrow's plan, Zsasz was simply enjoying the silence. The fact that Batman never catches him during the events of Arkham Knight adds a layer of grim realism to the Nightfall ending. This suggests that even as Batman ends his career, some monsters like Zsasz simply slipped into the shadows of the burning city, perhaps becoming the first targets for the new, nightmare version of the Bat. The references to Superman and the wider DC universe in Batman Arkham Knight were the first concrete signs that Rocksteady was looking beyond the Bat family to the broader Justice League. While earlier games hinted at other heroes through minor Easter eggs, Arkham Knight fully integrated the existence of the Man of Steel into the daily lives and fears of Gotham's citizens. These details weren't just nods to fans, they served to contrast the grounded, gritty urban terror of Gotham with the bright, almost mythological status of Metropolis. The Smallville reference is found on a specific newspaper prop, which was the Metropolis Star, which can be seen scattered in trash piles, on newsstands and inside the GCPD evidence room. The headline reads, "Smallville struck by a meteor shower." This is a direct reference to Clark Kent, specifically echoing the 1989 or 2001 meteor shower origin stories, where Kal-El's ship arrives during a chaotic celestial event that brought kryptonite to Earth. The fact that this is news in the Arkhamverse suggests one of two things. Either Superman is a relatively new phenomenon in this timeline, or the newspaper is a historical retrospective. Regardless, it grounded the Arkhamverse in the classic DC mythos, confirming that the Age of Heroes had officially begun outside of Gotham's boundaries. Another reference that I noticed while playing the game is from the Thug dialogue system. As Batman glides over the city, he can eavesdrop on militia soldiers and street thugs. One common line of dialogue involves a thug expressing his frustration with the night's chaos, saying, "The only thing that could make this worse is if the freak from Metropolis flew in here." Another thug might respond by noticing that they're lucky Batman doesn't have super strength or heat vision. This dialogue serves a brilliant narrative purpose. It references why Batman is so feared. To the criminals of Gotham, Superman is an alien freak whose power is incomprehensible and terrifying, whereas Batman is a human terror they feel they might have a chance against, which we all know is possible when hell freezes over. It also implies that Superman is an active, well-known figure who's likely already a member of the Justice League by the time this game takes place. But it doesn't end here. The Superman lore extends into the corporate world of Gotham. LexCorp has a significant presence in the city, with a massive skyscraper visible in the skyline and signage throughout the commercial districts. The most detailed interaction involves Lex Luthor's voicemail for Bruce Wayne, which can be heard in the Wayne Tower penthouse. In the message, Luthor speaks in a condescending, business professional tone, offering to buy Wayne Enterprises' Applied Sciences division. He remarks that they could do great things together, but the subtext is clear. Lex is trying to scout his competition. This established a rivalry between the two billionaire moguls long before they appeared on screen together in 2024's Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. Deathstroke is one of my favorite villains from the DC universe. The best thing I like about him is his costume and his single-eyed mask. Now, we know that he's made multiple appearances in previous Arkham titles, but in Arkham Knight, it's a bit different. In the Arkham Knight, Deathstroke and his two allies planned to make Gotham into a city of fear on Halloween night. Deathstroke stood by most of the night watching and even witnessed the Arkham Knight fail to beat Batman with the Cloudburst. After that, Scarecrow put Deathstroke in charge of Arkham Knight's militia and continued his own personal war against Batman. He also assumed the role of overseeing his campaign against Mr. Freeze if Batman didn't help Freeze. After Batman took down the entire militia, Deathstroke confronted him with his own personal tank. Batman engaged Deathstroke and destroyed his tank. As Batman left the Batmobile and approached in an attempt to apprehend him, Deathstroke leaped from his tank, sword in hand, and attempted to kill him. Instead, Batman caught Deathstroke out of the air after ejecting from the Batmobile, slammed him into the street, knocked him out with a massive strike to the chin, and took him to the GCPD lockup. Upon regaining consciousness, Deathstroke declared that since Batman had earned his respect, he would dedicate the rest of his life to killing him, and that he'd do it for free. When Deathstroke was sent into the holding cell after the other prisoners, he then told Batman that it was a mistake to place him in here, as he might end up being the only prisoner when he got back, which implied that he would probably kill all of them, although his overall casual demeanor afterwards suggested that he had decided against it. After Batman's identity as Bruce Wayne was exposed, Deathstroke told Batman that he didn't care who he was under the mask. All that mattered to him was the kill. Now, for those of you who don't know much about Deathstroke, let's dive into his lore. Originally a lieutenant colonel in the US Army during the Vietnam War, Slade Wilson was part of an experimental super soldier program where he gained enhanced strength, agility, healing factor, and intelligence. Slade became a mercenary soon after the experiment and rapidly gained a reputation as one of the world's greatest assassins. Deathstroke the Terminator, taking various assignments that would bring him into conflict with the heroes of the world, and often working under various organizations. A heavy flaw he did possess was that Slade could be too arrogant and overconfident regarding his own abilities. Having killed all of the men he fought, he believed Batman would simply be an easy target. It was likely this hubris that was a factor in his defeat, and he seemed to have learnt his lesson in Arkham Knight, as he appears less arrogant but still rather boastful about his war stories, which he told Batman repeatedly. It's likely that these many past victories caused his arrogance. As a result of being defeated a second time by Batman, Slade appears to have hypocritically forgotten his own code of not becoming personally involved in a job, and becomes obsessive with finally killing Batman, claiming he would not need payment and would do it for free. He was almost as troubled as Rick Flag was due to his background as a soldier, but he was able to recover with therapy. He even learned that changing the way he fought could be beneficial. He's also learned that fighting was easier when he didn't focus his anger, and felt more satisfied as a result. Since then, he's not allowed his actions to be guided by emotion. He still gives in to anger and kills to a certain extent, but he controls that to avoid losing sight of the bigger picture. What's another cool thing like the Batmobile? That's right, the freaking Batwing. In Arkham Knight, the Batwing serves as the backbone of Batman's logistical superiority. Unlike previous games, where upgrades were often found in static crates or unlocked via a menu screen, Arkham Knight treats technology as a physical delivery. Whenever you earn a Wayne Tech Point for a gadget or reach a story beat that requires a Batmobile upgrade, you're instructed to find the drop zone. When you trigger the event, if you look to the sky, you'll see the clouds part as Batwing descends at a high speed to deploy a specialized storage pod. The Batwing is technically active in the skybox throughout most of the game, though it's usually hidden by the low-hanging Gotham storm clouds and its own internal stealth dampeners. Rocksteady designed the aircraft to be a permanent physical entity in the game world to maintain their no-loading screen philosophy, as we discussed previously. When you call for an upgrade, the game triggers a scripted physics sequence. The Batwing dives from the stratosphere, levels out to match the height of Gotham's skyscrapers, and opens its central cargo bay. The drop pod is ejected with a trail of white smoke and small thrusters that guide it to a precise landing. If you use the photo mode during this sequence, you can see the incredible level of detail on the Batwing's chassis, including the heat staining on the jet turbines and the Applied Sciences logos etched onto the landing gear. A detail many players miss is that the Batwing's engine wash actually affects the environment. If the Batwing passes low enough during a scripted story drop, you can see the procedural rain, which we discussed earlier, being blown sideways by the sheer force of the jet's thrusters. Furthermore, the aircraft isn't invincible. In certain story segments, the Arkham Knight's automated missile defenses will target the Batwing, forcing Lucius to pull it back into the cloud layer. This reinforces the idea that the sky is just as much a battlefield as the streets of Gotham. That's it, folks. If you enjoyed this one, I'm sure you'll love the 2 hours of the Batman Arkhamverse Facts video that's on your screen right now. Click it and I'll see you there.